Imam Fareed Nassar leads a quiet life teaching Arabic to refugee children in Cedar Heights, balancing his faith with the challenges of being a Muslim in post-9/11 America while raising 3 successful children with his devoted wife Amal. But beneath the peaceful exterior of this small town lies a dark conspiracy as Lieutenant Miller and corrupt officers systematically target the Muslim community through illegal surveillance, intimidation, and violence. Now, with his bruised face becoming a symbol of resistance and a determined FBI agent by his side, Fareed must choose between safety and speaking truth to power, a decision that will expose a nationwide network of hatred and forever change what justice means in America. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel, it's free, and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The stop, the first blow came without warning. Imam Fareed Nassar's head snapped sideways as Officer Daniel's knuckles connected with his cheekbone, the force of it sending his kufi cap tumbling to the asphalt. The morning sun caught the golden badge on the officer's chest, momentarily blinding Fareed as he struggled to maintain his balance. "Terrorist," Daniels hissed through clenched teeth, his voice low enough that the gathering crowd couldn't hear. "I know what you people are planning." Blood trickled from the corner of Fareed's mouth, metallic and warm. 20 years in America, and it had finally happened. The thing his wife Amal had always feared. The thing he'd convinced himself was just paranoia. Through the ringing in his ears, Fareed became aware of phones being raised, recording. A young woman in hijab pushed forward, her eyes wide with horror. Beside her stood an elderly white man, his mouth set in a grim line of disapproval. "I am an American citizen," Fareed said quietly, refusing to raise his voice even as his pulse thundered. "And I have rights." Daniels laughed, a harsh sound like gravel underfoot. "Rights? You're nothing but a—" He never finished the sentence. From the gathering crowd stepped forward a tall, striking black woman in a tailored suit, her eyes sharp as she took in the scene. "Officer Daniels," she said, and her voice carried an unmistakable authority that made the policeman freeze. "Step away from that man. Now." As she approached, Fareed noticed something that made his heart simultaneously sink and soar. The unmistakable silver pin of the Department of Justice fastened to her lapel. What neither Fareed nor Officer Daniels could possibly know was that federal agent Samira Hassan had not stumbled upon this scene by accident. And what was about to unfold would shake the Cedar Heights Police Department to its very foundation. The morning had begun like any other for Fareed. He'd risen before dawn for Fajr prayer, the gentle nudge of his alarm barely necessary after decades of the same rhythm. Beside him, Amal had stirred, her hand brushing his arm before she too rose for ablution. Their modest 2-story home on Maple Street had been their sanctuary for 15 years. Photos of their 3 children, now all in college or beyond, lined the hallway leading to the prayer room Fareed had carefully constructed in what had once been a study. The mihrab, a simple wooden arch indicating the direction of Mecca, faced east. "You'll be late for your class," Amal had murmured after prayers, already moving toward the kitchen where the scent of cardamom and cinnamon would soon fill the air. "The children are coming for dinner tonight. Don't forget." Fareed had smiled, the crow's feet around his eyes deepening. At 57, his beard showed more salt than pepper, but his shoulders remained straight, his movements deliberate with the dignity that had earned him respect within Cedar Heights' growing Muslim community. "I would never forget," he'd replied, kissing her forehead gently. "Not when Layla is bringing little Zaid. My grandson deserves his grandfather's full attention." The drive downtown should have been uneventful. Cedar Heights, with its population of just under 100,000, had always seemed to Fareed a place of relative tolerance. The Islamic center where he served as imam had faced its share of challenges, particularly after 9/11 and during subsequent waves of anti-Muslim sentiment. But the interfaith council he'd helped establish had built bridges many thought impossible. So when he noticed the police cruiser following him for 3 blocks, Fareed had initially dismissed his unease as unnecessary vigilance. Even when the lights flashed, he'd believed it would be routine. A broken taillight perhaps, an expired registration tag he'd overlooked. Now, as he stood on the sidewalk with blood on his lips and his dignity under assault, those illusions shattered like glass. Agent Hassan's badge glinted as she held it up for Daniels to see. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division. I'll need you to step back immediately, officer." Daniel's face contorted, confusion mixing with defiance. "This is a local matter. You have no jurisdiction here." "I have every jurisdiction when I witness a civil rights violation in progress," Hassan replied, her calm only making Daniels appear more unhinged by contrast. "And I believe striking a citizen during a traffic stop without provocation qualifies." The crowd had grown, cell phones raised like talismans against injustice. Fareed noticed a young Arab man near the front, tears streaming silently down his face. Their eyes met briefly, the young man's filled with a painful recognition that twisted Fareed's heart. "Sir," Agent Hassan turned to Fareed, her expression softening slightly. "Are you able to tell me what happened here?" Fareed touched his cheek, wincing at the tenderness. "I was driving to the community center where I teach. Officer Daniels pulled me over. When I asked why, Fareed gestured to his face, the evidence plain enough. "He called him a terrorist," shouted the woman in hijab. "We all heard it." Murmurs of confirmation rippled through the onlookers. Daniel's hand moved toward his gun, a motion so quick Fareed barely registered it before Agent Hassan stepped between them. "Don't," she said, just one word but laden with warning. The crackle of a police radio broke the tension. More patrol cars were arriving, lights spinning silent patterns of red and blue across the storefronts. A heavy-set man in a police captain's uniform emerged from the lead vehicle, his face grave as he surveyed the scene. "Captain Reynolds," Daniels called, relief evident in his voice. "This FBI agent is interfering in a legitimate stop." "The suspect was..." "Quiet," Reynolds ordered, eyes taking in Fareed's bloody face, the crowd with their cameras and Agent Hassan's unwavering stance. "Agent, a word?" Hassan nodded but didn't move from her position between Fareed and Daniels. "Sir," she addressed Fareed, "would you be willing to make a formal statement about what happened here today?" Before Fareed could answer, a commotion at the edge of the crowd drew everyone's attention. A woman was pushing through, her hijab slightly askew in her haste. Amal's eyes found Fareed's immediately, widening at the sight of his injury. "Fareed!" She rushed to him, hands gentle as they cupped his face. "What have they done to you?" Something in Daniel seemed to snap at the sight of Amal's display of concern. "Stay back," he barked, reaching for her arm. Fareed moved with a speed that belied his years, placing himself between his wife and the officer. "Don't touch her," he said, voice low but resonant with a lifetime of giving sermons that commanded attention. For an electric moment, no one moved. Then Captain Reynolds stepped forward. "Officer Daniels, surrender your weapon and badge. You're on administrative leave pending investigation." Daniels' face drained of color. "Captain, you can't be serious. These people..." "That's an order, officer." The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, with trembling hands, Daniels unholstered his gun and unpinned his badge, placing them in Reynolds' outstretched palm. As Daniels was led away, Fareed felt Amal's hand slip into his, her fingers cold with fear. He squeezed gently, trying to reassure her, though his own heart raced. Agent Hassan approached them, her expression now openly sympathetic. "Mr. Nassar, Mrs. Nassar, I'm Agent Samira Hassan. I'd like to speak with you privately if possible." She handed Fareed her card, the FBI seal prominent. "What happened here today is unacceptable, but I believe it's also part of a pattern we've been investigating." Fareed studied her face, noting the subtle signs of her own faith, the modest cut of her suit, the slight indentation on her forehead from prostration during prayer. A sister in faith, working within the system he'd begun to doubt. "Why were you here?" he asked, the question that had been burning since she appeared. Agent Hassan's eyes flickered to the crowd, still recording, still watching. "That's part of what I need to discuss with you." Privately, Captain Reynolds rejoined them, his weathered face grave. "Imam Nassar, on behalf of the Cedar Heights Police Department, I want to express my deepest..." "With respect, Captain," Fareed interrupted, touching his split lip. "I'd prefer actions to apologies at the moment." Reynolds nodded, chastened. "There will be a full investigation. Officer Daniels will face..." "How many others?" Fareed asked quietly. "Excuse me? How many others has he treated this way? Muslims, Arabs, South Asians? How many didn't have witnesses or federal agents present?" Reynolds had no answer. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Amal squeezed Fareed's hand. "We should get your face looked at," she murmured. "The children will be worried." Fareed nodded, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind pain and a bone-deep weariness. But as he turned to leave, Agent Hassan stepped closer. "Mary, Mr. Nassar, she said, voice low enough that only he and Amal could hear. Cedar Heights PD has had 17 complaints of religious and racial profiling in the past year. 14 involved Muslim citizens. 3 resulted in physical violence. None have been properly investigated. She held his gaze. Until now. Fareed felt a chill despite the morning warmth. What are you asking of me? Your testimony. Your cooperation. She glanced at the dispersing crowd, at the captain conferring with his officers. Your courage. A verse from the Quran floated through Fareed's mind. Stand firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even if it be against yourselves, your parents, or your relatives. He looked at Amal, saw the fear in her eyes, but also the strength that had sustained them through decades in a country that too often viewed them with suspicion. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Come to our home this evening, Agent Hassan, Fareed said finally. We will talk. As they walked away, Fareed felt the weight of every phone still recording, every witness still watching. What had begun as a simple drive to teach children their heritage had become something far more consequential. And deep in his heart, he knew that from this moment forward, nothing would be the same. What he couldn't know was just how deep the corruption in Cedar Heights ran, or how dangerous his decision to stand for justice would prove to be. Chapter 2: Hidden Agendas. The Nassar home buzzed with tension as evening approached. Fareed sat at the kitchen table, pressing a cold compress to his face while Amal moved around him, preparing tea and arranging a plate of baklava. Despite his protests, she had insisted on calling their children to postpone the family dinner. They need to know, she had said firmly. Layla saw the video before I even reached you. It's already spreading online. Fareed closed his eyes, pain throbbing in his cheekbone. The hospital visit had confirmed nothing was broken, but the bruising would take weeks to fade. Physical wounds that would heal long before the invisible ones. Baba! The front door burst open as their youngest son, Tariq, rushed in. At 23, he had his father's height, but his mother's fiery temperament. I came as soon as Mama called. I saw the videos. They're everywhere. Tariq's eyes widened at the sight of his father's face. I'll kill him, he whispered, hands clenching into fists. I swear by Allah, You'll do no such thing, Fareed said sharply. Violence solves nothing. Neither does turning the other cheek. Look what they did to you. Tariq paced the kitchen, vibrating with rage. All these years you've told us to be model citizens, to build bridges. For what? So they can beat you in broad daylight? Amal placed a steadying hand on Tariq's shoulder. Your father is right. Justice, not vengeance. The doorbell's chime interrupted their argument. Through the frosted glass of the front door, Fareed could make out 2 silhouettes, one tall and straight-backed, the other shorter and stockier. The FBI agent, Tariq asked, tension radiating from him. Fareed nodded, rising to answer the door. Agent Hassan stood on the porch, her dark suit exchanged for a more casual blazer over jeans. Beside her stood a man Fareed recognized instantly. Mayor David Wilson, Cedar Heights' first black mayor, and someone Fareed had worked with on the Interfaith Council. Imam Nassar, the mayor said, his normally jovial face somber. May we come in? Fareed stepped back, allowing them entry. Mayor Wilson, I didn't expect you. I insisted, Wilson replied, following Fareed to the living room. What happened today? It's unconscionable. Once they were seated, Agent Hassan wasted no time. Mr. Nassar, what I'm about to share is part of an ongoing federal investigation. Everything discussed must remain confidential. She opened her briefcase, removing a file. For the past 8 months, the FBI has been investigating a pattern of civil rights violations within the Cedar Heights Police Department. We believe there's an organized effort within the department to target Muslim residents. Organized how? Fareed asked, leaning forward despite his pain. A group of officers, possibly led by someone in command, coordinating harassment, illegal surveillance, even falsified reports to justify arrests or searches. She laid out photographs, Muslim men and women, some Fareed recognized from his congregation. These individuals have all reported incidents in the past year. We believe they're connected. Mayor Wilson cleared his throat. When I took office, complaints were already piling up. I tried addressing it internally, but the blue wall of silence, Tariq finished bitterly. Wilson nodded. I reached out to the Justice Department 3 months ago. Agent Hassan's team has been gathering evidence since then. Why are you telling me this? Fareed asked, though he suspected he already knew. Hassan met his gaze directly. Because what happened to you today wasn't random, Imam Nassar. We believe you were targeted specifically. The room fell silent. Amal's hand found Fareed's, squeezing tightly. Why? She whispered. Hassan slid another document across the table, a printout of an email with several names redacted. This was sent 2 weeks ago between officers we're investigating. Your name appears alongside the phrase, priority surveillance. Fareed scanned the document, his blood running cold. This mentions the youth program at the community center. They're monitoring children? They're claiming it's a radicalization risk, Hassan said, disgust evident in her tone. It's a pretext for harassment. But why Fareed specifically? Amal pressed. Mayor Wilson and Agent Hassan exchanged glances. Because of me, Wilson admitted. We've been working on appointing Imam Nassar to head the new Community Oversight Board for Police Conduct. It wasn't public yet, but they found out, Fareed finished, the pieces falling into place. And they wanted to discredit me before the announcement. Hassan nodded. We think Officer Daniels was tasked with finding something, anything they could use against you. When he couldn't, he escalated to direct confrontation. What they didn't count on, Wilson added, was Agent Hassan witnessing it, or the public reaction to the videos. Which presents us with an opportunity, Hassan said carefully. Your assault has created a moment of public attention we can leverage to break this case open. With your help. Tariq, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. You want to use my father as bait? Tariq, Fareed cautioned. No, it's a fair question, Hassan acknowledged. We're not asking your father to put himself in danger. But we do need his public testimony, and we need him to proceed with accepting the position on the oversight board. So they can target him again? Amal's voice trembled slightly. So we can catch them in the act, Hassan corrected. With federal protection in place. The doorbell rang again, startling everyone. Tariq moved to answer it, returning moments later with Captain Reynolds. I apologize for the intrusion, Reynolds said, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable at finding the mayor and an FBI agent already present. I wanted to personally check on Imam Nassar. An awkward silence filled the room as Reynolds took in the documents spread across the coffee table. His jaw tightened. Perhaps I should come back another time. Actually, Captain, Hassan said smoothly, your timing is perfect. We were just discussing the department's history with Muslim residents. Reynolds' expression hardened. With all due respect, Agent, that's an internal matter. Not anymore, Mayor Wilson interjected, rising to his feet. Not after today, Reynolds turned to Fareed. Imam Nassar, I want you to know that Officer Daniels' actions don't represent our department. He's been suspended pending. Suspended, Tariq interrupted incredulously. He assaulted my father on video. He should be in jail. Administrative procedures must be followed, Reynolds said stiffly. There will be a full investigation. Conducted by whom? Hassan asked pointedly. Your Internal Affairs Division has dismissed every complaint filed by Muslim citizens in the past 18 months. Reynolds' face flushed. You're overstepping, Agent Hassan. Am I? She held up the email. Care to explain why Imam Nassar was under priority surveillance? The captain's eyes darted to the document, then back to Hassan. I have no knowledge of any such directive. It came from your department server, Captain, Hassan pressed, specifically from Lieutenant Gregory Miller's account. Reynolds' expression flickered, a momentary break in composure that didn't go unnoticed. If you'll excuse me, I have duties to attend to. As he turned to leave, Fareed spoke up. Captain Reynolds, the officer paused, looking back. When I came to this country, I believed in American justice. I taught my children to trust in the system. Was I wrong to do so? Reynolds didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. Not every officer is like Daniels. But enough are that my husband was assaulted in broad daylight, Amal said, her voice steady despite her fear. Enough are that our community lives in constant anxiety. Reynolds looked at her, then back at Fareed. I'm sorry for what happened today. Truly. He nodded curtly to the others and left, the door closing firmly behind him. He's involved, Tariq said the moment Reynolds was gone. Did you see his face when you mentioned Miller? We don't know that for certain, Hassan cautioned, but his reaction was telling. Fareed sank back in his chair, suddenly exhausted. What exactly are you proposing, Agent Hassan? She leaned forward, her expression intense. We need you to accept the position on the oversight board publicly. Make it clear you won't be intimidated. Meanwhile, we'll monitor communications within the department to see how they react. You want to provoke them? Amal said, her voice tense. In a controlled environment, Hassan assured her. With federal protection for your family. Mayor Wilson spread his hands. Imam Nassar, I wouldn't ask this if I saw another way. But this rot in our police department goes deep. Today it was you. Tomorrow it could be any member of your congregation. Tariq paced the room, agitated. What, Ikrami? What about the other officers involved? Daniels can't be the only one. He's not, Hassan confirmed. We've identified at least 6 officers potentially involved, including Lieutenant Miller. But we need more than a suspicion to build a case. The room fell silent as Fareed considered his options. The throbbing in his face seemed to intensify as he weighed the risk to his family against his duty to his community. I need to speak with my wife and children first, he said finally. This decision affects all of us. Hassan nodded, gathering her documents. Of course, we'll give you space to discuss it. She handed Fareed her card. Call me when you've decided, but please don't wait too long. Moments like this, when public attention is focused, don't last. As Agent Hassan and Mayor Wilson prepared to leave, Fareed's phone buzzed with a news alert. His heart sank as he read the headline. Officer claims self-defense in Muslim leader assault. He showed it to the others, his hand trembling slightly. It's starting already, Hassan said grimly. They're trying to control the narrative. Mayor Wilson's face darkened. The press conference is set for tomorrow morning. They'll use it to spin their version of events. Then I should be there, Fareed said quietly, looking to Amal. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she nodded almost imperceptibly. If you decide to speak publicly, Hassan cautioned, it changes everything. The protection we discussed becomes essential immediately. I understand, Fareed said, though in truth, he wasn't sure he did. How could anyone understand what it meant to step deliberately into the crosshairs of those sworn to protect but bent on intimidation? After their visitors left, the Nassar family gathered in the living room. Tariq remained agitated, while Amal sat silently, her prayer beads moving through her fingers. They're asking too much, Tariq insisted. Haven't you already given enough, Baba? Fareed touched his bruised face gently. This isn't about me. It's about all of us. Our community. The children you teach, Amal. The future we're building here. But at what cost, Tariq demanded. Your safety? Our family's peace? There is no peace built on silence in the face of injustice, Fareed replied. The Quran teaches us. I know what it teaches, Tariq cut in. But it also teaches prudence. Protection of family. The doorbell rang yet again, interrupting their debate. Tariq moved to answer it, returning with a middle-aged woman Fareed recognized instantly. Sophia Chen, a reporter for the Cedar Heights Chronicle. I apologize for coming unannounced, she said, her eyes widening at the sight of Fareed's bruised face. But I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow's press conference. The department is already pushing a narrative of officer safety and terrorism concerns. Terrorism? Amal gasped. Based on what? Sophia grimaced. They're claiming Officer Daniels observed suspicious behavior and possible terrorist communications when he stopped your husband. That's absurd, Tariq exploded. My father is an imam. He teaches Arabic to children. I know, Sophia agreed, which is why I'm here. The Chronicle won't print their version unchallenged, but we need your statement. Fareed looked from Sophia to his family, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Whatever decision he made now would shape not just his future, but potentially the future of every Muslim in Cedar Heights. Tell me something, Ms. Chen, he said finally. Do you believe there's systematic targeting of Muslims by the police in this city? Sophia didn't hesitate. Yes, I've been gathering evidence for months, but without someone willing to speak on the record, someone with your standing in the community, it's been impossible to publish. The final piece clicked into place for Fareed. This wasn't just about his assault or even the oversight board. It was about breaking a silence that had allowed injustice to flourish. I'll give you an exclusive interview, he said quietly. Tonight, before the press conference tomorrow. Tariq started to object, but Fareed raised a hand. This is my decision, son. Sometimes standing firm is the only way forward. As Sophia set up her recording device, Fareed met Amal's eyes across the room. In them, he saw fear, yes, but also pride and a strength that matched his own. Whatever came next, they would face it together. What none of them could possibly know was that at that very moment, Lieutenant Gregory Miller was meeting with others in a basement office at the Cedar Heights Police Department, their faces illuminated by the glow of computer screens displaying surveillance photos of the Nassar home. We have a problem, Miller was saying, his finger tapping on an image of Agent Hassan leaving the house. A big problem, and we need to deal with it. Tonight, Chapter 3, Deeper Waters. The lights of Cedar Heights twinkled like fallen stars as midnight approached. In the Nassar home, shadows stretched across the living room where Fareed sat alone, the house finally quiet after hours of tumult. His interview with Sophia Chen had lasted nearly 2 hours, his words measured but uncompromising as he recounted not just today's assault, but years of subtle harassment and discrimination. My faith teaches patience, he had told her, but it also demands justice. Now, with Amal finally asleep upstairs and Tariq reluctantly departed for his apartment, Fareed found himself unable to rest. The dull ache in his face had become a companion, pulsing in rhythm with his troubled thoughts. He reached for his prayer beads, the smooth wooden spheres familiar under his fingertips. The sound came without warning, a soft metallic scrape from the backyard. Fareed froze, listening intently. It could be nothing. A raccoon, perhaps, or the neighbor's cat, but instinct told him otherwise. Moving silently to the kitchen window, he peered through the blinds into the darkness. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then a shadow detached itself from the maple tree near the garden. A human figure, crouched and cautious. Fareed's heart hammered against his ribs. He reached for his phone, then hesitated. If he called 911, who would respond? The same department he had just accused of systematic discrimination? The decision was made for him when a second figure emerged from behind the shed, the moonlight glinting off something in his hand, something unmistakably like a gun. With trembling fingers, Fareed dialed the number Agent Hassan had given him. She answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the hour. Agent Hassan. Someone is outside my house, Fareed whispered, pressing himself against the wall beside the window. 2 men. I think one is armed. Are you alone? Her voice sharpened. My wife is upstairs. Our son went home. Get to the most secure room in your house. Lock the door. I'm 10 minutes away with a team. A pause. And Imam Nassar? Stay on the line with me. Fareed moved quickly to the stairs, climbing them as silently as possible. Amal stirred as he entered their bedroom, her eyes fluttering open. Fareed? What's... He pressed a finger to his lips, then whispered. There are men outside. Agent Hassan is coming. Years of living as a visibly Muslim family in post-9/11 America had prepared Amal for this moment. Without a word, she slipped from the bed and moved to the closet, retrieving the emergency bag they kept packed. Another precaution they had hoped never to need. A crash from downstairs shattered the silence. Glass breaking, then heavy footsteps. They're inside, Fareed whispered into the phone. Bathroom, Hassan instructed. Lock yourselves in. We're 5 minutes out. Hand in hand, they crept across the hall to the master bathroom, locking the solid door behind them. Amal pulled out her own phone, her hands remarkably steady as she texted their children a single word. Safe. Their prearranged signal that something was wrong, but they were taking precautions. Where are we looking? A male voice drifted up from downstairs, tense and urgent. Office first. Computer files, anything with names. The second voice was colder, more controlled. Then the bedroom. Make it quick. Fareed and Amal exchanged glances in the darkness. These weren't random burglars. They were looking for something specific. Do you think they heard us? Amal whispered, barely audible. Fareed shook his head, then realized she couldn't see him. I don't know, he breathed. The sounds of ransacking grew louder. Drawers being emptied, furniture overturned, then heavy footsteps on the stairs. Agent Hassan, Fareed whispered into the phone. They're coming upstairs. 3 minutes, she promised. We're coming with local backup. Trusted officers. A door slammed open, their bedroom. Amal's grip on Fareed's hand tightened painfully. Bed sheets still warm, one intruder called. They're here somewhere. Footsteps approached the bathroom door. The handle jiggled. In here, the cold voice announced. Open it. Fareed moved Amal behind him, positioning himself between her and the door. His mind raced through options. There was no window, no other exit. The first impact against the door was like thunder in the confined space. The wood creaked but held. Again, ordered the cold voice. A second impact, harder this time. The frame splintered slightly. Cedar Heights police. Hands up! The shout from downstairs was followed by a chaos of footsteps and shouted commands. The bathroom door received a final desperate kick before the intruder's footsteps retreated. A cacophony of shouts and thumps echoed through the house. FBI, drop your weapons. On the ground now! Agent Hassan's voice, authoritative and clear. More shouting, then the distinctive sound of handcuffs clicking shut. Imam Nassar, Mrs. Nassar, Hassan called up the stairs. It's safe now. Fareed unlocked the bathroom door with shaking hands. In the hallway, two agents in tactical gear nodded respectfully before continuing to secure the house. Downstairs, Fareed found a scene of controlled chaos. His once orderly living room strewn with papers and overturned furniture. In the center, two men knelt handcuffed, their faces turned away. One of them wore a Cedar Heights Police Department jacket. Are you both all right? Agent Hassan approached, her eyes scanning them for injuries. We're unharmed, Fareed confirmed, his arm around Amal's shoulders. Thanks to your quick response. Hassan nodded grimly. We had surveillance on your house after our meeting. Good thing we did, she gestured to the kneeling men. Do you recognize either of them? Fareed studied them carefully. The one in the police jacket kept his head down, but the other, that's Officer Parker, Fareed said, recognition dawning. He patrols near the Islamic Center. And the other is Sergeant James Weber, Hassan confirmed. Both under Lieutenant Miller's direct command. Fareed felt a chill run through him. They were looking for something specific. Files, names. Your community center records, Hassan nodded. Membership lists, youth program participants. Anything they could use to fabricate terrorism connections? Amal's hand flew to her mouth. The children in our programs are safe, Hassan assured her. But this confirms what we suspected. There's an organized effort to target Muslim residents and organizations. As the intruders were led away, Agent Hassan guided Fareed and Amal to the kitchen, the one room relatively untouched by the ransacking. A female agent brought them tea, the familiar aroma incongruously comforting amid the chaos. This changes everything, Hassan said, her voice low and intense. Breaking and entering, attempted theft of private records, possible intent to plant evidence, all tied directly to officers following orders. Lieutenant Miller's orders? Fareed asked. That's what we need to prove, Hassan replied, and why we need to move quickly. She leaned forward. The press conference is in 7 hours. We have a narrow window to act before they regroup. Amal's hands tightened around her teacup. You want to use this incident? It wasn't a question, but Hassan nodded anyway. Combined with your interview and today's assault, it establishes a clear pattern of targeted harassment and potentially criminal conspiracy. The front door opened, admitting a disheveled Mayor Wilson, hastily dressed in jeans and a rumpled button-down shirt. His eyes widened at the state of the living room. My God, he breathed. Are you both all right? Shaken but unharmed, Fareed assured him. The mayor collapsed into a kitchen chair, accepting the cup of tea Amal offered. I came as soon as I got the call. 2 of our officers, breaking into your home. He shook his head in disbelief. This is worse than we imagined. And exactly what we needed, Hassan said, her tone clinical but not without compassion. Direct evidence of coordinated targeting. At the expense of my home and my family's safety, Fareed noted quietly. Hassan had the grace to look momentarily chastened. For which I am deeply sorry. But now we can act decisively. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages. We've already obtained warrants for Lieutenant Miller's electronic devices and office based on tonight's events. Teams are executing them now. You think he ordered this directly? Mayor Wilson asked. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence, Hassan replied. Hours after our meeting, after Imam Nassar gives an interview implicating the department, these officers were sent to find or plant something that would discredit him before the morning press conference. Fareed rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of what was unfolding. What happens now? We move up our timeline, Hassan said firmly. Instead of waiting for the department's press conference where they'll control the narrative, we hold our own. First thing in the morning, the FBI announcing a formal investigation into civil rights violations by the Cedar Heights Police Department, with you, Mayor Wilson, standing in support. And me, Fareed added, meeting her gaze steadily. I should be there. Fareed, no, Amal protested, reaching for his hand. It's too dangerous. After tonight, hiding would be more dangerous, he countered gently. They've shown how far they're willing to go. Our best protection now is complete transparency and public accountability. A commotion at the front door interrupted them. Tarek burst in, his eyes wild with fear until they landed on his parents. He rushed forward, embracing them both. I got your text, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I came as fast as I could. What happened? As Amal explained in hushed tones, Agent Hassan received another call. Her expression darkened as she listened. We need to move, she announced as she ended the call. Lieutenant Miller wasn't at his home or the station when our teams arrived. He's in the wind, and his last known location was less than a mile from here. Fareed felt Amal's hand tighten in his. You think he might come here? We can't rule it out, Hassan admitted. We need to get you to a secure location for the night. Pack only what you need. Tariq straightened, protective instinct flaring. Where will you take them? A safe house outside the city, Hassan replied, already coordinating with her team via text. Just until morning. After the press conference, we'll establish more permanent security measures. As Amal went upstairs to gather essentials, Fareed lingered in the kitchen, his eyes scanning the home they'd built together. Prayer rugs carefully aligned toward Mecca, children's artwork framed alongside verses from the Quran, family photos from Eid celebrations and graduations. This is more than just our house, he said softly to no one in particular. It's our life in America. Mayor Wilson approached, placing a hand on Fareed's shoulder. And we'll make sure you can return to it safely. You have my word. 20 minutes later, a convoy of unmarked SUVs pulled away from the Nassar home, carrying Fareed and Amal to an undisclosed location. Tariq followed in his own car, refusing to be separated from his parents despite Agent Hassan's concerns about maintaining operational security. As they drove through the sleeping town, Fareed gazed out at Cedar Heights, the place he'd chosen to call home, to raise his children, to build his community. Now it felt like hostile territory, its familiar streets suddenly menacing. You're thinking we should have left long ago, Amal said softly, reading his expression as she had for 30 years of marriage. No, Fareed replied, taking her hand. I'm thinking that whatever happens tomorrow, we've already won something important. What's that? The truth, he said simply. After years of silence and fear, our community's experience is finally being acknowledged. That alone is a kind of victory. Amal leaned her head against his shoulder. But at what cost, Habibi? Fareed had no answer as the lights of Cedar Heights receded behind them. Meanwhile, across town, Lieutenant Gregory Miller sat in a darkened office, his face illuminated by the blue glow of computer monitors. Before him lay folders of surveillance photos, the Islamic Center, the community school, the Nassar family home. Beside these sat a USB drive containing fabricated emails and documents designed to link Cedar Heights' Muslim community to extremist organizations overseas. His carefully constructed operation was unraveling. Years of work, dozens of officers groomed and indoctrinated, a network of surveillance and intimidation built to protect Cedar Heights from what he saw as the Muslim threat. Miller's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Safe house location tracked. Moving in at dawn, he smiled grimly, reaching for his service weapon. The game wasn't over yet. Enjoying our stories? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content. Now let's get back to our story. Chapter 4, Dawn of Truth. The safe house was a rustic cabin nestled among pine trees 30 miles outside Cedar Heights. Its unassuming exterior belied the sophisticated security system that Agent Hassan's team had installed. Motion sensors, surveillance cameras, and a direct line to FBI headquarters. Inside, the decor was Spartan but comfortable. Basic furniture, plain walls, and windows covered with blackout curtains. The first light of dawn crept across the horizon as Fareed completed his Fajr prayer on a small rug facing east. Amal and Tariq prayed beside him, their whispered devotions the only sound in the stillness. The night had passed without incident, though sleep had been elusive for all of them. I was taught that dawn prayers are when Allah is closest to us, Fareed said as they finished. That our supplications are most likely to be heard in these quiet moments between night and day. What did you pray for, Baba? Tariq asked, folding his prayer rug with practiced hands. Fareed smiled faintly. For justice without vengeance. For truth without more suffering. Agent Hassan entered quietly, her crisp suit suggesting she'd been awake for hours. The press conference is set for 8:30 a.m. Mayor Wilson just arrived to brief us on the latest developments. In the small kitchen, Mayor Wilson sat at the table, dark circles under his eyes testifying to his sleepless night. Before him lay several manila folders and a laptop. There's been a significant development, he announced as they gathered around. Lieutenant Miller is officially missing. His house is empty and he hasn't reported for duty, but before he disappeared, he sent this email to the entire department. He turned the laptop to face them. On the screen was an email with the subject line, Muslim Threat Assessment, Confidential. Fareed leaned forward, reading the first paragraph aloud. For years, I have monitored the growing Muslim presence in Cedar Heights, which represents a clear and present danger to our community. The Islamic Center and its affiliated organizations serve as recruitment and planning hubs for potential terrorist activities. He couldn't continue. His voice failed him as the hateful words blurred before his eyes. Tariq finished reading, his voice tight with controlled rage. Officers who stand with me will be remembered as protectors when the true nature of this threat is revealed. Those who oppose our measures are complicit in endangering American lives. He sent this to everyone? Amal asked, horrified. Every officer in the department? Mayor Wilson nodded grimly. And to several local reporters. Sophia Chen called me immediately. Other outlets are starting to run with it. This changes our approach, Agent Hassan said, pacing the small kitchen. Miller is trying to rally support, frame this as a matter of national security rather than civil rights violations. She paused, looking directly at Fareed. We need to counter this narrative before it takes root. How? Fareed asked, feeling suddenly exhausted despite the prayer that usually invigorated him. By exposing it for what it is, the desperate act of a man whose prejudice has corrupted his duty, Hassan replied. We have the officers who broke into your home in custody. They're talking, confirming Miller's direct orders. And we have this, Mayor Wilson added, opening one of the folders. Results from the search of Miller's office last night. He spread photographs across the table. Surveillance photos of Muslim families at parks, schools, and shopping centers. Highlighted names of children enrolled in the Islamic Center's weekend school. Maps with routes marked between Muslim homes and businesses. My God, Amal whispered, her hand over her mouth. He was watching our children? For at least 3 years, Hassan confirmed. Building dossiers on families that fit his profile of concern, which appears to be any practicing Muslim in Cedar Heights. There's more, Wilson said, his expression darkening further. We found draft orders for surveillance expansion, proposed detention procedures for emergency situations, and lists of Muslim-owned businesses to be subjected to enhanced scrutiny. He was building infrastructure for systematic persecution. Tariq slammed his hand on the table. This is fascism! How was this allowed to continue? Because it was hidden within legitimate police work, Hassan explained. Traffic stops that seemed random but targeted Muslims. Building code inspections focused on Muslim businesses. Community safety checks that just happened to concentrate around the Islamic Center. And no one noticed the pattern? Fareed asked, his voice hollow. Some did, Wilson admitted. But complaints were handled internally by Miller's department. They disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. The group fell silent, absorbing the magnitude of what they faced. The press conference, Fareed said finally. This information must be made public. Yes, Hassan agreed, but we must be strategic. Miller wants this portrayed as national security versus religious freedom, a false dichotomy that plays on fear. We need to reframe it as what it truly is, corruption of law enforcement and violation of constitutional rights. I'll speak, Fareed said with quiet resolve. As an American citizen whose rights were violated, as a religious leader whose community was targeted, as a father whose family was endangered. Amal reached for his hand, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Are you certain, Habibi? There will be backlash. There already is, he replied gently. Silence now would only validate Miller's narrative. A young FBI agent knocked on the doorframe. Agent Hassan, we have a situation. Protesters are gathering outside the police department. Protesters? Wilson asked, alarmed. What kind? Both kinds, sir. About 50 people with anti-Muslim signs, but also over 200 counter-protesters supporting the Muslim community. It's tense. Hassan checked her watch. We need to move up the timeline. If this escalates before we can control the narrative. The agent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling. Ma'am, we just received intelligence that Lieutenant Miller may have been spotted near downtown. Near the protesters? Hassan demanded. The agent nodded grimly. Get the cars ready, Hassan ordered. We leave in 5 minutes. As the group hastily gathered their belongings, Fareed found himself pulled aside by Mayor Wilson. Imam Nassar, the mayor said quietly, I need to ask you something difficult. If Miller is found and arrested, he'll likely face federal charges. But there will also be a local component to the prosecution. What are you asking me? When the time comes, Wilson said carefully, would you be willing to meet with him? To talk, Fareed was taken aback. Meet with the man who orchestrated an assault on me? Who sent officers to break into my home? Who surveilled my community's children? Yes, Wilson replied simply. Because when this is over, Cedar Heights will need healing. And while justice is necessary, reconciliation might be too. The request left Fareed momentarily speechless. Part of him wanted to refuse outright, to demand punishment without mercy for the man who had terrorized his community. But another part, the part that had led him to become an imam, recognized the wisdom in Wilson's request. "I cannot promise forgiveness," Fareed said finally, "but I will promise to listen when the time comes." Wilson nodded, seeming to understand the weight of even this small concession. That's all anyone could ask. The convoy departed minutes later, speeding towards Cedar Heights under a brightening sky. In the lead SUV, Fareed sat between Amal and Tariq, drawing strength from their presence. Agent Hassan sat across from them, coordinating with her team via radio. "The situation is evolving rapidly," she informed them. "News of Miller's email has spread. More protesters are arriving on both sides." "Has he been located?" Fareed asked. "Not yet," Hassan replied. "But we have teams searching. Every available agent and trusted local officer is deployed." As they approached Cedar Heights, Fareed gazed out at the familiar landscape. Morning light gilded the fields and forests surrounding the town, creating a deceptive picture of tranquility. "I keep thinking of Surah al-Falaq," he said softly, almost to himself. "I seek refuge in the Lord of the Dawn from the evil of what he has created." Amal squeezed his hand. "The rest of the verse promises protection, Habibi." "I know," he nodded. "I'm trying to hold on to that promise." The radio crackled with an urgent report. Situation escalating downtown. Physical confrontations reported between protest groups. Hassan spoke rapidly into her radio, ordering additional teams to the scene. "Change of plans," she announced to the passengers. "We're heading straight to City Hall. We need to get ahead of this before it becomes a full-scale riot." The convoy changed direction, sirens blaring as they cut through side streets to avoid the growing crowds downtown. Through the tinted windows, Fareed caught glimpses of people hurrying toward the center of town, some carrying signs, others recording with phones. "This isn't just about me anymore," he realized aloud. "This has become something much larger." "It always was," Hassan replied. "Miller's actions have forced a community reckoning that was long overdue." When they arrived at City Hall, the scene was controlled chaos. FBI agents secured the perimeter, while city officials hurriedly prepared the front steps for an impromptu press conference. News vans lined the street, reporters and camera operators positioning themselves for the best angles. Mayor Wilson was rushed inside to confer with the city council, while Agent Hassan led the Nassars to a private room to prepare. The sounds of the growing crowd outside filtered through the windows. Chanting, occasional shouts, police sirens in the distance. "We have confirmation," an agent reported, entering the room with a tablet. "Lieutenant Miller was spotted 20 minutes ago near the protest. He's armed and in civilian clothes." Hassan's expression tightened. "He's planning something." "Like what?" Tariq demanded. "I don't know," she admitted. "But a man like Miller, who spent years building his own private surveillance state, doesn't just fade away when exposed. He'll want to control the ending of this story." Fareed felt a chill of premonition. "He'll come here." Hassan nodded slowly. "That's my assessment too. City Hall represents official authority, the platform from which his narrative will be publicly rejected." "Then we're putting my father in danger by having him speak," Tariq protested. "No," Fareed said firmly. "We're confronting the danger that's already present. Hiding from it won't make it disappear." Hassan checked her weapon discreetly. "We've tripled security. Every entrance is covered, and we have plainclothes agents throughout the crowd. If Miller attempts to approach, we'll intercept him." "And if you don't?" Amal asked, the question hanging in the air unanswered. A young aide knocked at the door. "5 minutes to the press conference, sir." Fareed stood, straightening his jacket and adjusting his kufi. The bruise on his face had darkened overnight, a vivid testament to the violence that had set these events in motion. "Let me speak with my family alone, please," he requested. Hassan nodded, stepping outside with her team. When the door closed, Fareed turned to Amal and Tariq. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, "know that I am proud of the life we've built here, of the family we've created, of the community we've nurtured." "Baba," Tariq began, his voice thick with emotion. "Let me finish," Fareed continued gently. "Our faith teaches us that standing for truth is never wrong, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult." He took their hands in his. "Today we stand not just for ourselves, but for every Muslim family who has lived in fear, for every child who deserves to grow up proud of their heritage, for the America we believe in, one that honors its promise of liberty and justice for all." Tears streamed down Amal's face as she embraced him. Allah protect you, my love. Ameen, Tariq whispered, joining the embrace. When Agent Hassan returned, she found them standing together, foreheads touching in a moment of shared prayer. She waited respectfully until they separated. It's time, she said simply. The walk to the front steps of City Hall felt endless. Through windows, Fareed caught glimpses of the crowd that had gathered, hundreds strong now, with news cameras trained on the podium. He could see the division clearly. On one side, angry faces holding signs with slogans like, "No Sharia in America" and "Security First." On the other, a diverse group with messages of support and solidarity. What struck him most, however, was the third group, the largest by far, of ordinary citizens who seemed uncertain, concerned, waiting to be convinced one way or another. These were the people he needed to reach. Mayor Wilson went first, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. Citizens of Cedar Heights, we gather today to address serious allegations of civil rights violations within our police department. What began yesterday with the assault on Imam Fareed Nassar has revealed a disturbing pattern of targeted harassment against our Muslim neighbors. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Wilson continued, outlining the evidence discovered in Miller's office and the connection to last night's break-in at the Nassar home. This is not about national security, Wilson emphasized. This is about the corruption of law enforcement, the violation of constitutional rights, and the betrayal of public trust. Agent Hassan stepped forward next, her FBI credentials visible on her lapel. As of this morning, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has opened a formal civil rights investigation into systematic discrimination against Muslim residents of Cedar Heights. She detailed the charges being brought against officers Parker and Weber for the break-in, announcing that additional officers were under investigation for their roles in Miller's operation. Lieutenant Gregory Miller is currently a fugitive wanted for questioning, she concluded. We urge anyone with information about his whereabouts to contact authorities immediately. He is considered armed and dangerous. Then it was Fareed's turn. As he approached the microphone, he felt strangely calm. The fear and doubt that had plagued him earlier had been replaced by clarity of purpose. My name is Imam Fareed Nassar, he began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. I came to America 20 years ago, seeking the promise this nation makes to all who arrive on its shores: freedom, justice, and dignity. He touched his bruised face gently. Yesterday, that promise was broken when I was assaulted by an officer sworn to protect this community. But what we now know is that this was not an isolated incident, but part of a systematic campaign to target Muslims in Cedar Heights. Fareed paused, scanning the faces before him. Some hostile, many supportive, others simply confused. I stand before you not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as an American citizen demanding accountability. Not as a foreigner, but as your neighbor, a man who has raised his children here, contributed to this community, and believed in its potential to represent the best of what America can be. From the corner of his eye, Fareed noticed movement. Agents speaking urgently into their radios, scanning the crowd with increased urgency. The question before us today, he continued, is not whether Islam belongs in America. Muslims have been part of this nation since its founding. The question is whether America will live up to its own founding principles, whether equal protection under the law applies to all citizens, regardless of their faith. A disturbance erupted at the edge of the crowd, people scattering, shouts of alarm. Agent Hassan moved closer to Fareed, her hand inside her jacket. The surveillance and harassment of Muslim families in Cedar Heights was built on a false premise that our faith makes us inherently suspicious, that our cultural differences make us somehow less American, that our devotion to Allah is incompatible with devotion to this country. The commotion grew louder. Fareed could see agents converging on a point in the crowd, but he refused to be silenced. Nothing could be further from the truth, he declared, raising his voice. The Quran teaches that diversity is by divine design. We have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Our differences are meant to enrich, not divide us. Suddenly, a figure broke through the security line, a disheveled man in civilian clothes, his eyes wild with desperation. Lieutenant Miller. He's lying, Miller shouted, pointing at Fareed. Naromir, they're all lying. I've seen the evidence. They're planning. Before he could finish, agents tackled him to the ground. But not before Fareed saw the glint of metal in Miller's hand. A gun, raised and aimed directly at him. Time seemed to slow. Fareed was vaguely aware of Tariq shouting, of Amal screaming, of Agent Hassan moving to shield him. But in that frozen moment, he kept his eyes on Miller's face. Saw the hatred there, yes, but also the fear. The deep, consuming fear that had twisted this man's sense of duty into something monstrous. The shot never came. Miller was subdued, his weapon secured. As agents led him away in handcuffs, their eyes met briefly across the chaotic scene. What passed between them wasn't forgiveness. It was too soon for that. But a moment of recognition, human to human, beneath the labels that divided them. When order was restored, Fareed returned to the microphone, his hands steady despite what had just transpired. What we witnessed today, he said quietly, is the logical conclusion of fear and hatred left unchecked. This is where stereotyping leads. This is what happens when we dehumanize those who differ from us. The crowd was utterly silent now, the attempted violence having sobered even the most vocal protesters. But we have a choice, Fareed continued. We can choose a different path, one where safety does not come at the expense of liberty, where security does not require suspicion of our neighbors, where diversity strengthens rather than threatens our community. He looked directly into the nearest camera, knowing his words would reach beyond those physically present. To my fellow Muslims in Cedar Heights, do not let this incident drive you into isolation. Your place is here in the open as full participants in American life. To my non-Muslim neighbors, I invite you to know us as we truly are, not as caricatures or fears. Fareed's voice grew stronger with each word. And to those like Lieutenant Miller, who see in us only threat and danger, I say that your fear, while powerful, is not stronger than our shared humanity. It is not stronger than justice, and it is not stronger than truth. As he stepped back from the podium, applause erupted, tentative at first, then swelling until it echoed off the stone facade of City Hall. Looking out at the faces before him, Fareed saw something he hadn't expected. Not just support from allies or rejection from opponents, but reflection. People considering, perhaps for the first time, their own assumptions about their Muslim neighbors. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the beginning of something important. A community reckoning with truth it had too long ignored. Agent Hassan guided Fareed back to his family, her expression both relieved and grim. Miller will be facing multiple federal charges, she informed him. The weapon was loaded. He intended to, she didn't need to finish. Tariq embraced his father fiercely, as if reassuring himself that Fareed was truly unharmed. Amal's face was pale but composed, her quiet strength undiminished by the ordeal. You knew he would come, she said to her husband, not a question but a statement. Fareed nodded. I hoped he wouldn't, but yes, I suspected. And still you spoke. Because silence would have been a kind of surrender, he replied simply. As they were escorted back inside City Hall, journalists called out questions, cameras flashed, and the crowd continued to discuss what they had witnessed. But for Fareed, the noise receded to a distant hum. What remained was a profound sense that something had shifted. In Cedar Heights, in himself, in the story his community would tell about itself going forward. The dawn of truth had broken over their town. What would grow in its light remained to be seen. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. The week following Lieutenant Miller's arrest unfolded in a blur of press conferences, community meetings, and legal proceedings. Cedar Heights found itself thrust into the national spotlight, its name becoming shorthand for the insidious ways Islamophobia could corrupt institutions meant to protect all citizens. Fareed watched from his living room as cable news pundits debated the implications of what the media had dubbed the Miller conspiracy. The Nassar home, restored to order after the break-in, had become a sanctuary again, albeit one now guarded by private security hired by the mayor's office. They're missing the point, Tariq said, gesturing at the television where a panel discussed whether Miller's actions constituted terrorism. This isn't an isolated case of one rogue officer. This is systemic. Fareed muted the television. They'll catch up eventually. The truth has momentum of its own. The doorbell rang, prompting a quick check of the security monitors before Amal answered. Sophia Chen entered, notebook in hand, her expression both professional and sympathetic. Imam Nassar, thank you for agreeing to this follow-up interview, she said as they settled in the dining room. The Chronicle is running a special report on the full scope of Miller's surveillance operation. We've spoken to 12 families so far who were targeted. Only 12? Tariq interjected. There were over 60 in those files. Sophia nodded grimly. Many are still afraid to come forward publicly. That's partly why I'm here. Your continued visibility has given others courage, but there's still a long way to go. She opened her notebook, pen poised. The FBI has released some additional information about Miller's network. 7 officers have been suspended pending investigation, including Captain Reynolds. Reynolds? Fareed was genuinely surprised. I thought he was the one who suspended Daniels after my assault. A calculated move, according to Agent Hassan, Sophia explained. When Miller's email went out, Reynolds realized the operation was exposed and tried to distance himself by appearing to take action against Daniels. But the evidence shows he was fully aware of the surveillance program for at least 2 years. Fareed sat back, absorbing this new betrayal. Reynolds had looked him in the eye, had expressed regret for what happened. The layers of deception seemed endless. What about the other officers involved? Amal asked, setting down a tray of mint tea. The ones who broke into our home? Officer Parker has agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. He's providing details about how the operation was structured, who gave orders, and how evidence was manipulated. Sophia accepted a steaming cup. Sergeant Weber is maintaining his innocence, claiming he was just following orders. The Nuremberg defense, Tariq muttered bitterly. Sophia continued, her tone becoming more formal as she shifted into interview mode. Imam Nassar, I'd like to ask about the community's response. The Islamic Center has seen record attendance at prayers and events since your press conference. Can you speak to that phenomenon? Fareed considered the question. The past week had indeed brought unprecedented numbers to the mosque. Not just Muslims, but allies from other faiths, curious citizens, even former skeptics seeking understanding. Fear thrives in isolation, he said finally. For years, many in our community tried to be invisible, speak softer, dress more American, avoid public displays of faith. We hoped that by blending in, we could avoid becoming targets. He shook his head slowly. Miller's operation has proven what many of us suspected. Invisibility doesn't protect us. Only solidarity can do that. And the non-Muslims who've been attending events are demonstrating the best of America, Fareed said firmly. They're saying, we see you, we stand with you, we recognize your humanity. That's powerful medicine for a community that has felt unseen or misunderstood for so long. A knock at the door interrupted them. Agent Hassan entered, accompanied by Mayor Wilson. Their expression suggested this wasn't a social call. Imam Nassar, Hassan began without preamble, we need to discuss security for tomorrow's hearing. Miller's arraignment. The formal presentation of charges that would determine whether he remained in custody pending trial. Fareed had been asked to attend but hadn't yet decided. We've received credible threats, Hassan continued, glancing apologetically at Sophia. This is off the record. The journalist nodded, closing her notebook. What kind of threats? Tariq demanded. Miller has supporters outside the department, Wilson explained. People who believe his narrative about Muslim threats. They've been organizing online, planning some kind of demonstration at the courthouse. Demonstration or disruption? Amal asked sharply. Hassan's expression tightened. We're not sure, but we're taking all precautions. The hearing will have enhanced security, and we'd like to arrange for you to enter through a private entrance. If it's too dangerous, Wilson added quickly, no one would think less of you for not attending. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Fareed. He sipped his tea, considering options. Part of him wanted to avoid the confrontation, to protect his family from further trauma. But another part, the part that had grown stronger with each challenge, recognized the importance of being present. I'll attend, he said finally, but Amal and Tariq should stay home. Absolutely not, Amal countered immediately. We are a family. We face this together, Tariq nodded firmly. If Baba goes, I go. Fareed felt a surge of love for his family mixed with concern for their safety. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced down, then stood abruptly. Layla, he said, naming his eldest daughter. She's coming home. With Saeed, Amal's hand flew to her mouth. Now, with everything happening? She says exactly because of everything happening. She wants us all together. The atmosphere in the room shifted, personal concerns temporarily displacing political ones. Mayor Wilson excused himself, promising to return later with detailed security plans. Agent Hassan remained behind, conferring quietly with Sophia in the corner, while the Nassars absorbed this unexpected development. "I should prepare Zaid's room," Amal said, already mentally rearranging the household to accommodate their daughter and grandson. "I'll help," Tariq offered, following his mother upstairs. Left alone with Hassan and Sophia, Fareed felt the weight of the past week settle more heavily on his shoulders. His family was being drawn further into a situation he had never wanted for them. "You're worried," Hassan observed, joining him by the window. "Wouldn't you be? My daughter is bringing my 3-year-old grandson into what could become a volatile situation. We'll ensure your family's safety," Hassan promised. "The FBI takes threats against witnesses in federal investigations extremely seriously." "It's not just physical safety I'm concerned about," Fareed admitted. "It's what this is doing to our sense of home, of belonging. My children were born here. This is the only country they've ever known. And now they're being forced to confront the reality that some of their fellow citizens, people sworn to protect them, see them as enemies." Sophia, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "If I may, Imam Nassar, that's precisely why your daughter is coming home. Not despite the danger, but because of it. Family rallies when threatened." "She's right," Hassan agreed. "And it's not just your family. I've seen the same pattern in every civil rights case I've worked. Communities under threat grow stronger, not weaker." Fareed nodded slowly, finding truth in their words. Before he could respond, the front door opened and Layla entered. A small boy with curly black hair perched on her hip. Said's eyes widened at the sight of his grandfather, and he immediately squirmed to be put down. "Jado!" he squealed, running to Fareed with arms outstretched. Fareed scooped him up, burying his face in the child's neck, inhaling the sweet scent that only grandchildren seem to possess. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The threats, the hearings, the media spotlight all faded in the simple joy of holding his grandson. "Careful of Jado's face," Layla cautioned, referring to the still visible bruise on Fareed's cheek. She embraced her father carefully around Zaid, then greeted Hassan and Sophia with the polite formality of someone raised to respect guests, regardless of circumstances. The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Amal and Tariq's return. The reunion that followed tears, laughter, excited chatter, created a bubble of normalcy that felt almost surreal against the backdrop of the past week's events. Later, after Zaid had been put down for a nap and the house had settled into a quieter rhythm, Fareed found Layla in the kitchen, preparing food with Amal in the comfortable silence of long familiarity. "You didn't have to come," he said softly. Layla looked up, her expression a mirror of her mother's determination. "Yes, I did. When I saw what happened to you on the news," her voice caught. "Nobody hurts my father and gets away with it." "The system is working," Fareed reminded her. "Miller has been arrested. The officers involved are facing charges. This time," Layla said pointedly, "because it was caught on video. Because a federal agent witnessed it. Because you had a position of respect in the community." She set down her knife, turning to face him fully. "But what about all the times it wasn't captured? All the people who don't have your advantages?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortable but necessary. Fareed had asked himself the same thing many times over the past week. "That's why we have to see this through," he acknowledged. "Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who couldn't speak up." Layla nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else, Baba. Something I haven't told you yet." She glanced at Amal, who nodded encouragingly. "I've been offered a position at the Justice Department, Civil Rights Division." Fareed blinked in surprise. Layla had been practicing corporate law in Chicago for years, a career path that had always seemed at odds with her passionate nature. "What prompted this change?" "You did," she said simply. "Watching you stand on those steps, speaking truth despite the danger, it reminded me why I wanted to be a lawyer in the first place." Her eyes shimmered with emotion. "I want Zaid to grow up in a country where his faith doesn't make him a target. And I want to be part of making that happen." Pride swelled in Fareed's chest, even as concern lingered at the edges. His daughter was choosing a difficult path, one that would place her on the front lines of conflicts like the one they were currently navigating. "You're sure?" he asked. "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time," she confirmed. "I start in 6 weeks." The conversation was interrupted by Tariq calling from the living room. "You need to see this." They hurried in to find him staring at the television, where breaking news banners scrolled across the screen. The volume was low, but the headline was clear. "Exclusive: Miller's surveillance extended beyond Cedar Heights." Sophia, who had been preparing to leave, paused in the doorway. "I need to get to the newsroom." On screen, Agent Hassan appeared at a press conference, flanked by FBI officials. The caption identified her as the lead investigator in what was now being called Operation Shadow Crescent, a name that made Fareed wince with its religious overtones. Tariq turned up the volume. "DNet evidence suggests coordination with similar operations in at least 3 other jurisdictions," Hassan was saying. "We're looking at a potentially nationwide network of law enforcement officials engaged in unconstitutional surveillance of Muslim Americans." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What had begun as one officer's assault in a small town was expanding into something far larger and more systemic. "They were sharing information," Tariq said, connecting dots. "That's why Miller had files on Muslims who were just visiting Cedar Heights or passing through." Fareed felt a chill despite the warm kitchen. If Miller had been part of a larger network, then the threat wasn't contained by his arrest. It was dispersed, hidden within departments across the country. "I should have been notified of this development before it went public," Agent Hassan said from the doorway, having returned to the Nassar home. Her expression was a mixture of determination and apology. "I'm sorry you had to learn about it this way." "How big is this network?" Fareed asked. "We don't know yet," Hassan admitted. "But Miller's electronic communications suggest coordination with officers in at least a dozen cities. They shared surveillance techniques, profiling criteria, even lists of persons of interest who traveled between jurisdictions." "Like a terrorist watch list," Layla said, her lawyer's mind grasping the implications. "Except the only criteria for inclusion was being Muslim." "Exactly," Hassan confirmed. "Which means tomorrow's hearing just became even more significant. Miller isn't just facing charges for his actions in Cedar Heights. He's potentially the key to unraveling a nationwide conspiracy." The weight of this revelation settled over the room. What had felt like a local victory, important but contained, was expanding into something far more consequential. "Do you still want to attend?" Hassan asked Fareed directly. Before he could answer, the security system chimed, indicating movement on the property perimeter. They turned to the monitor to see a group of people gathering at the end of the driveway. Not threatening, but clearly there with purpose. "Who are they?" Amal asked, instinctively moving towards Zaid's room upstairs. Hassan checked her phone, receiving updates from the security team. "Not protesters," she said with evident relief. "They appear to be community members." Fareed moved to the front window, peering through the curtains. What he saw made his throat tighten with emotion. Dozens of people, Muslims in traditional dress, yes, but also Christians wearing crosses, Jews in kippot, and many with no visible religious identifiers, stood quietly holding candles despite the daylight. Some held signs, "Stand with Imam Nassar," and "Hate has no home here," and simply, "Salam, Shalom, peace." "They've been gathering all day," Hassan explained softly. "Word spread through faith communities. They're keeping vigil, making sure you know you're not alone." Fareed watched as more people arrived, joining the silent demonstration of solidarity. An elderly woman in a church dress, a group of teenagers in hijabs and jeans, a rabbi and an imam standing side by side. "I'll be at the hearing," Fareed said, his decision crystallizing. "Not just for myself or my family, but for them, for what they represent, the America we're all fighting for." As evening fell, the candles outside became points of light in the gathering darkness, small flames of hope illuminating the path forward. Inside, the Nassar family gathered for dinner. The table expanded to include Agent Hassan and, somewhat surprisingly, Mayor Wilson, who arrived with security plans but stayed for Amal's cooking. The conversation flowed from serious to light and back again. Discussions of legal strategy interspersed with Saeed's cheerful babbling and family stories that had nothing to do with surveillance or civil rights. It was, Fareed realized, a perfect metaphor for the life they were defending. One where faith and family existed alongside civic engagement and professional responsibilities, none diminishing the other. After dinner, when the guests had departed and Zaid was tucked in bed, Fareed slipped outside onto the porch. The vigil had thinned but not disbanded. About 20 people remained, their candles still burning despite the late hour. One figure detached from the group approaching the porch. Fareed recognized Noah Friedman, the rabbi from Beth Shalom Synagogue, and a longtime ally in interfaith work. "We'll be there tomorrow," Rabbi Friedman said simply, gesturing to the remaining vigil keepers. "All of us. You won't face this alone." Fareed nodded, words temporarily beyond him. The rabbi didn't press for a response, just squeezed Fareed's arm gently before returning to the group. From the doorway behind him, Amal spoke softly. "They see you, Habibi. They see us." "Not just us," Fareed replied, finding his voice. "They see what's at stake. The kind of community we either build together or lose together." As they stood watching the quiet testament of solidarity before them, Fareed felt something shift within, a crystallization of purpose that transcended his personal ordeal. Tomorrow would bring challenges, certainly. The hearing would be tense, the media attention intrusive, the threats perhaps real. But tonight, looking at the small flames held by neighbors of different faiths, different cultures, different political persuasions, Fareed understood that what had begun as his personal struggle for dignity had transformed into something larger, a community's collective stand for justice. And in that understanding came a calm certainty that, whatever happened in the courthouse tomorrow, the true verdict would be written not in legal decisions, but in the continued willingness of ordinary citizens to stand guard against hatred with nothing but candles and conviction. For the first time since Officer Daniels had struck him, Fareed felt not just anger or determination, but genuine hope. Chapter 6. Full Circle. 6 months after Lieutenant Miller's arraignment, Cedar Heights welcomed spring with a tentative sense of renewal. Cherry blossoms lined the avenue leading to the courthouse where Miller had been denied bail and remanded to federal custody pending trial. The same courthouse where, just yesterday, he had accepted a plea agreement, admitting to civil rights violations, conspiracy, and attempted assault with a deadly weapon in exchange for his testimony against the larger network of officers involved in what prosecutors now called the Shadow Crescent Conspiracy. Fareed stood at the window of his office in the Islamic Center, watching children play in the courtyard. Muslim children alongside their non-Muslim friends, their laughter a counterpoint to the serious conversations taking place inside. The center had transformed over these months, becoming not just a place of worship, but a hub for community organizing, civil rights education, and interfaith dialogue. A knock at the door announced Layla's arrival. In her Justice Department blazer, she looked every inch the federal prosecutor she was becoming. "They're ready for you, Baba," she said, a hint of familiar pride in her voice. Fareed nodded, adjusting his kufi before following her to the main hall, where the first meeting of Cedar Heights' new Community Oversight Board was about to begin. Mayor Wilson had kept his promise, not only appointing Fareed as chair, but ensuring the board had real authority to review police practices and investigate complaints. The hall buzzed with conversation as Fareed entered. Board members, community representatives, and journalists all gathered for this inaugural session. Among them sat Rabbi Friedman, Sophia Chen, Agent Hassan, now promoted following the successful expansion of the investigation, and most surprisingly, Officer Daniels. The officer who had struck Fareed that fateful day sat alone, his posture stiff with discomfort. Following his suspension, he had contacted Fareed directly, asking to meet privately. That meeting, tense, painful, but ultimately transformative, had led to Daniels' testimony against Miller and his unexpected application to serve as a police liaison to the Oversight Board. As Fareed took his place at the center table, the room quieted. He surveyed the diverse faces before him. People who had stood in an opposition 6 months ago, now united in purpose. "Salamu alaikum," he began. "Peace be upon you all. Today we begin the real work of healing and reform." His gaze found Daniels briefly before continuing. "Our journey to this moment has been difficult. Lives have been disrupted, trust has been broken, and our community has confronted painful truths about prejudice and power." Fareed touched his cheek, where the bruise had long since faded, but the memory remained. Yet from this pain has come possibility. The possibility of building a community where safety and dignity exist for everyone, regardless of faith, ethnicity, or background. Outside the windows, the cherry blossoms released petals that drifted like snow across the courtyard where the children played, a visual reminder of beauty emerging from dormant branches thought dead by winter's chill. Fareed smiled, feeling the circle completing itself. The assault that had been meant to silence him had instead amplified not only his voice, but the voices of countless others who had suffered in silence. "Let us begin," he said simply, opening his folder as the real work of justice, slow, intentional, and enduring, commenced at last. In the courtyard beyond, a young boy in a kufi and a girl with a cross necklace chased cherry blossom petals together, laughing as they swirled in the spring breeze. Their innocence, the ultimate testimony to what was possible when courage confronted fear, and dignity stood firm against hatred. The journey was far from over, but the path forward was clear, illuminated by the same candles of solidarity that had kept vigil that night months ago. Small flames of hope showing the way home.